Welcome to Hiking with Kathleen. We're starting off in an ice fog, which ends up in a spring thaw. Stay tuned. The fog creates a beautiful, mystical effect on the forest this morning. The northern flicker, or yellow-shafted flicker version of it, is a woodpecker. This male has a black mustache or a molar marking. On today's hike, I've had a chance to see some really cool sightings. A tom turkey that was showing his fantastic tail feathers to a nonchalant hen turkey. And there's some cat and mouse activity going on with the Eastern Chipmunk. Breeding season is in the air. Some red squirrel activity. So there's all kinds of wildlife activity that's taking place now as we are moving into spring. And I was so delighted to see, as I'm out on the trail today, when the temperatures are expected to be the third day in a row of mid-teen degrees Celsius. So a lot of the snow melt is now in the river, which is great. And yeah, so on this beautiful day, there's a lot of signs of spring, and I'm happy to have you along. Spring is the common nesting season. Many are unable to make their own tree cavity, but happily take over ones that fit their family's needs. Beavers are rodents that can engineer their own lodge. Birds often build their own nest in a tree, and many will continue to reuse them year after year. Spring is also the time of year when male deer, called bucks, shed their antlers. They're made of bone and often disappear at the hands of rodents that chew them for their own calcium needs. Birdsong is commonly heard in spring. Males sing to attract a mate, and it also helps to outline his territory for other birds. Today I'm exploring some rural property with some trails cut, but mostly game trails for me to follow. Come along. I found a better bridge to go over. So I'll cross over this little creek. We'll see what's on the other side. Besides finding animal tracks on a game trail, what you also will find is their scat, and in this case, there's deer scat on the trail right here. So given that there are 3 piles of scat in the very close proximity to one another, it gives rise to the assumption that it's either the same deer traveling along here, or maybe there was a group of deer traveling along here together. But anyway, it's just another confirming feature of a game trail. I was surprised when I was videoing a muskrat that it actually came as close to me as it did. I was surprised that it was so unconcerned. I think it's just it didn't know I was here standing so quietly until I moved and it plunged into the water in order to swim up the creek away from me. I'll show you how close it was. So here's where my camera is. So it came up the shore and was just busily gathering some things, I think. Some grasses. Anyway, I don't expect I'll see it again until it's convinced that I really am gone. But it's a really neat trick. When you stand really still for extended periods of time, wildlife just forgets you're around and carry on. They carry on doing whatever it is that they were doing before you arrived. Well, that's a wrap for today. I really appreciate your spending some time with me. I went to 3 different spots. That's why you noticed there were 3 different sort of openings. And I found that all very exciting because 2 of those places were private property. The one that had the ice cover and the ice fog at the beginning, and the one at the end where I was checking out the game trails, because really there weren't a lot of developed trails throughout. So those are really exciting for me because you never know what you're going to see. And of course it's beautiful scenery. A large part of it is untouched that way. So a couple of comments I wanted to make regarding the material you saw in there. On the last property I went through, and there was a scattering of deer fur. And the property owner there actually informed me that he was in his home and he heard the sound of the yipping coyotes, and he heard them as they were taking down a deer. So that collection of fur you saw was from a young deer, and it's usually of that kind that a coyote can possibly kill, because deer typically, when they're mature adults in good condition, they can outrun and take off. That's their best defense, really, is to take off. But if the animal is young, or if the animal is old and therefore not at its prime, those can be candidates that coyotes will go after. So there were a couple of skulls that this landowner had come across on his property. And one of the ones had a full rack of antlers, and unfortunately that one was one that was shot by a poacher. And the deer was shot, I suppose, near the road and made its way closer to the homeowner's home, so the poacher didn't pursue it. That deer was actually an older buck, and the way that you can age white-tailed deer is by their teeth, the wear on their teeth. So what I have here is I have the skull of a doe. And the way we can tell it's the skull of a doe is because there are no buds on the top of her skull from which to grow antlers. The wear lines on the teeth are what we look at in order to age the deer. The teeth become more worn as the animal ages because the way a deer eats, it rotates the lower jaw around the upper jaw, and that's how it chews its food. So naturally, these teeth will wear down in time. So when they have nice pointed edges, they haven't been ground down over the course of a lifetime. And the buck that I looked at, and you'll see an image of that, that is a buck that had been around, perhaps 9 years or so. So that was an older male. But anyway, just wanted to mention that the scattering of fur, that was indicative of a kill site, and oftentimes as a result you can find bones and things like that nearby. So anyway, I really appreciate your taking the time to join me on today's adventures, or this week's adventures, and I hope to see you next Tuesday. Bye for now.